That Dan Brown so far has, how should we say, had his finger right on the pulse of esoterica in the universe. 60 million copies so far.
Right, and we're going to talk more about the book, about the Da Vinci Code, and certainly about the story behind it, which is something that you can talk really deeply about. But anyway, what's the deal with Dan Brown? I mean, is he a spook? I mean, really? I mean,
he's a very lucky person who was placed at the right time. There's been a lot of people that did the basic research that went into the Da Vinci Code.
Right.
Myself included. I made my own small contribution. And apparently Dan Brown decided that he would go for esoteric thrillers.
Wow,
His first book, Angels and Demons, all about the Illuminati.
You guys are great for doing it. So, anyway, the whole deal is connected, believe it or not, to this Da Vinci Code thing. And I've been sort of promoting the show that we're going to talk about the Da Vinci Code and alchemy and all this stuff. And people are, I think, trying to figure out what the connection is. But I'm just going to let you do that because Fulcanelli and the story of the cross at Henday really are sort of tied into the whole Da Vinci story.
It's tied in a very weird way. I had no idea. Fulcanelli began to go in some pretty unusual directions. And one of the directions he went is the connections to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which was the late 19th, early 20th century sort of now most famous magical, quote-unquote, order.
And when we hear the word Hermetic, though, then that goes back to Egypt, right? And then
Hermetic
and all this.
The sense of Hermes.
Right.
The whole Gnostic idea. And what we do know about the Golden Dawn, it was one of these things that was probably kind of made up by a group of people who wanted to dabble in this stuff. But from somewhere they got some very powerful ideas. And interestingly enough, the people in England...
We've actually done lots of magic with the Pentagon, unbeknownst to the government, and it works the same.
Is there a reason they made it that way?
Oh yes.
The founding fathers.
They didn't. Founding fathers didn't make it. Here's the fractal. Oh, that's my finger. Look at that. That's me pointing to it.
This is Vincent showing me this 25 years ago.
This is the Pentagon, and what we did was we stellated it and found these points. And we banished the military-industrial complex in 1992, and we had 8 years of peace and prosperity. And right about where my finger is pointing is where the plane hit the Pentagon. And they broke open the Pentagon, and all hell broke loose, literally. Now, this Tree of Life pattern is not just a handy karma.
Sometime in the mid-40s of the first century, a group of refugees arrived in southern France that included Mary, Martha, Bethany, their brother Lazarus, several of Jesus' closest disciples in the inner or family circle, including relatives of both his mother Mary and his cousin John the Baptist.
And this is documented.
Well, it's documented from archaeological point of view.
Right. As well as anything in this stuff is documented.
Right. We know archaeologically that there was a large influx of Jews in this particular time period, in the 20 or 30 years before the overthrow of the temple. The Roman emperors in particular had allowed this particular region to be settled by the overflow from Palestine. In fact, you find some of their disposed rulers of the region, like Herod Antipas and so forth, being stuck in little villas up the Rhone River in like Vienne and so forth. So it was pretty much, how shall we say, Galilee West, Palestine West.
Okay.
And from the archaeological remains, we know that from the mid-1st century, there were Christians in southern France.
Very interesting. Yeah, and this was the early Christians, the Gnostic Christians and the Cathars, and we'll have to talk about all this stuff, right?
They sort of grew into one another.
Right.
It sort of fell apart on them when they couldn't come through with the third volume. But what they did is they produced a sort of a magical resonance, for want of a better word, that was picked up in the next generation by Pierre Plantard and the pranksters of Zion, who then, working on the same idea that there was something really odd and really amazing that was threatening to the Catholic Church that was found at Rennes-le-Château, built this huge mythology that now we, of course, have a movie about the Da Vinci Code. Without the whole idea of the Priory of Zion and the particular spin on the Priory of Zion that Holy Blood, Holy Grail put on it, there certainly wouldn't have been a Da Vinci Code.
Amazing.
So, however it all connects, and again, there's a little bit more research to be done around the edges. We're talking about a piece of an object, a piece of evidence that is literally explosive and literally, according to what I can find from various sources, could be considered incontrovertible proof, not so much that Jesus had a family, but that he didn't die on the cross. That he probably was alive at least as late as Matsada, if not much. One of the people who arrived with the Marys at St. Marie de la Mer in roughly 45 AD was a fellow called Saint Trophimus. Now, Trophimus just means triumphant one. It's a title. It's not really a name.
Okay.
We don't know much about him other than he was an ascetic. He meditated in a sword-shaped cave, which is still there. You can still go visit it. And in 52 AD, he imprinted his knee print and or his hand print on one of these ankh-covered sarcophagus lids in the cemetery at Arles, in the Aix-les-Champs cemetery at Arles. Now, the tradition was that this was actually Jesus. Okay, it was Jesus either come down miraculously through the prayers of Saint Trophimus.
Okay.
But the object existed and could be seen in a little tiny chapel there in the cemetery up to the 12th century. In the 12th century, it got caught up in politics. They built a new cathedral for it, and somehow it disappeared in between the little chapel and the cathedral.
Okay.
Now, whether that's the Grail in the sense that this is something that demonstrates the reality of Jesus, and whether we're looking at something like that Saunier found, that's like, okay, we can date this to, look at this, So what we know is that Constantine, just a few years later, in his great struggle to become the one emperor, actually ended up with the spear of St. Maurice and the sword of St. Maurice. When the legion was decimated, apparently those two items were taken by the Roman authorities. The cup can still be found at the place where it happened. The weird little canton of, are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Zion in Switzerland.
No kid.
That's right. It's there to this day, very near the place where St. Maurice's body.
Now, the Kabbalists had already worked this out by the time of Jesus. The four-letter names and how they're projected is roughly 2,000 years old. Dr. D came up with the idea of the projected three-dimensional cross from a manuscript called The Consecrated Book of the Little Black Venus, which had a very strange construction of the seal with which you would invoke this particular Black Madonna, Black Venus, center of the galaxy goddess. And D, understanding the mathematics.
The purification. Cathar meant the purified ones or the perfected ones.
Wow, and then that relates right back to alchemy.
Indeed, and there's quite an alchemical strand in this Gnostic version of Christianity. And part of the alchemical focus is the Black Madonna, the whole idea of Mary Magdalene, the whole idea of the sacred feminine, the whole idea of including the goddess.
I love it.
And that's why the Da Vinci Code has hit such a nerve with people for the last 3 years. If the Christian church really wants to die, then they'll ignore what's been going on, what has been brought to the surface by all of this. Because the ladies in the audience are just not having it.
Right.
So if Christianity wants to die, they'll ignore what the Da Vinci Code really means. And we certainly have had way too much domination in the past. And, the Catholic Church has just simply killed too many people. So if the Da Vinci Code and all of this, all the work that we've been doing on the Grail, I mean, I'm a historian. If you write a historical book about these subjects, you'll sell 10, 20,000 copies. If you write a good mystery novel, 60 million. Okay? But the historical background needs to be fleshed out.
Right.
And it's not so much that, okay, this is the truth or this is not the truth, but we need to look at the very idea that maybe everything we've been told about Jesus Christ and Christianity is a lie.
Right. I mean, if you want to start talking about works of fiction, I mean, if you really want to go to the mat, you know, I mean, it's sort of hard to prove a lot of these old books.
In fact, that was one of my answers on the show was, well, how do you feel about the fact that the Vinci Code claims to be true, but it actually has all these errors in it? And I said, well, the same could be said of the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
The Priest, the Painter and the Devil was the second film which I made for the BBC, which was seen in 1975. By then, of course, I'd done a great deal of my own research, and the story was beginning to alter considerably. But even so, even then, I didn't know really what it was about.
My search for significant geometry began when I found this device concealed on this document, and again it is the pentagram, the symbol used by disciples of the occult within which they perform their magical rites. If Poussin is indicating anything here, it is the mystic pentagon. The creative force seems to radiate from the shepherdess's mind. Does she echo the Albigensian belief that all physical matter created is the work of a god of evil? The parchments themselves make no great effort to hide a key to that truth. Yet again, this document picks out more letters, easily identified by their small size. They spell out, quite simply, Rex Mundi, King of the Earth, an epithet applied to the devil, the Albigensian creative god of evil whom Saunière placed in his church. Many theories have been put forward concerning the significance of this figure, but I realized that the meaning of the whole statuary group was simple and quite startling. Rex Mundi, King of the Earth, supports the holy water. Above that, there are salamanders, creatures of fire. And crowning all, the 4 angels, creatures of pure spirit or air. What message was Saunière trying to pass on? What statement was he making? Air, fire, water, and earth. The 4 elements of alchemy. Again, imagery of the occult placed here by a 20th century priest, and just outside the church is the chateau, whose round tower is called the Tower of Alchemy. We are told that the alchemists were searching for a way to convert base metal into pure gold. But this was only a physical counterpart of the true alchemist's search for a way to transmute base man, creation of the devil, into pure spirit at one with God. The pentagram has already appeared elsewhere, hidden in this parchment. But this pentagram, unlike the mountains, was an irregular one. It broke through its surrounding circle. What could this imply? It broke through its surrounding circle. What could this imply?